Okay, tonight we have the less excitable groups. It's always exciting to have our liberal view, because then we find out that the Republicans are all evil, and then we have Uncle Ed and Bob on the conservative view and find out that the Democrats are Satan. And somehow they blame each other. It's always humorous, but the emotion, the passion comes out. With our libertarians, they tend to be more laid back. The show isn't as exciting, which in some regards is nice. Let's start with introductions.
Hi, I'm Mike Soares. I am now the treasurer of the Milford RTC, the Republican Town Committee.
Congratulations. I'm Mike Schiavi. I'm on the Finance Committee, and I'm actually a Democrat, though, Al, but that's okay. I'm a pragmatic Democrat. I can listen to both sides.
Well, you know, I've always said one of the things I feel best about in Massachusetts, I have a hard time discerning the difference between a conservative Democrat and a liberal Republican. They seem to be in that mix that I call purple, and somewhere in there the Libertarians.
It's more of a triangle, and they're closer to the middle, but kind of off. Yeah.
Yes, your triangle I have never figured out. I mean, that's as clear to me as Bitcoin, and we'll talk about that later. Donald Trump.
Yes.
I mean, I hear all the things bad about Trump.
Yeah, I mean.
But look at the economy. What do I say?
If you listened before the 2016 elections, if Donald Trump was elected, we'd be at war with North Korea. The stock market would crash. You know, people's rights would be violated, and none of that's happened. In fact, everything has kind of gone the other way. Things have improved quite dramatically, and I don't even think a Democrat could dispute that.
He's just a character,
But
playing a role on television.
Michael, does he not suffer from actually fulfilling his campaign promises?
I don't know what's he fulfilled so far. He pushed through it. His party pushed through a tax cut. We're not sure it's really tax reform yet, and we're not sure what the long-term effects of it are. But his party has basically cast to the side their fiscal responsibilities by pushing through this tax cut. Now, what happened to the days when we used to pay bills? We don't seem to do that anymore. Last president that actually had a surplus, I believe, was a Democrat, right?
But you don't have to pay for tax cuts. You have to pay for spending. That's the thing.
So good.
So
do the same.
We decide how much we want to tax, and then we have to spend within those tax funds. You don't go the other way. You don't spend all your money and then decide how much you're going to tax later on.
But Mike, we already have bills. We have bills that we haven't paid. We had 2 wars in the last decade that we never paid for, and that's what has come back to haunt us at the beginning.
I agree. We should end the wars.
See, now I have a problem.
We need to pay for the wars that we've already
Well, I have
fought.
a problem when they play games with the debt ceiling. Because to me, wait a minute, I've spent the money. I just have to pay for it now. You know, going to any administration saying, I'm not going to let you borrow enough to pay the debt seems a bit self-serving and hypocritical.
It just becomes a sensational story every 6 months, right?
But it forces you to cap. You still pay the debt. You simply don't accumulate any more debt.
But
how do you do that? You would have to cut spending dramatically at that point if you don't authorize
or
the
increase revenues dramatically.
Or increase revenues dramatically. But simply
increase revenues means increase taxes.
Or just more avenues of which revenue comes as the basis of taxes. Now, there are companies that have decided to strategically move their operations or their headquarters or call themselves an entity offshore to shield themselves from paying legitimate taxes. And I think that's as criminal as anything.
That's because you haven't made the taxes attractive enough to business.
Yeah, but wait a minute.
And other countries have.
Michael, I can't agree with criminal because it's not an Apple. I think morally it's wrong. They're making their money in the U.S. That money should be taxed in the U.S.
Right.
and benefit Americans.
subjectively
not-
criminal. It's not
Right,
illegal.
I'm just saying, you can't say criminal,
No,
because
because they have a row of lawyers that have
they
already
got
told them
1,000
it's
lawyers
not.
to say, how close to the line can we go?
Right, but from a legitimate looking at what they're doing.
Stinks.
Right.
it's-
But Al, if you make iPhones in China and you sell iPhones in China, why should Apple pay the U.S. government a tax on that? And that's essentially what our current system forces them to do. If they want to bring that money to the U.S., they've made it there, but if they want to bring it to the U.S., now they have to pay taxes on the money that they produced and earned in a different country.
But that problem, I mean, been there when we used to sell scientific equipment from the U.S. Okay, basically, the European governments wanted you to have a transfer price that was free. So all your profit is made in Europe, you pay all your taxes in Europe, and somehow they used to agree on a middle ground where you would pay enough taxes in the U.S. that nobody was happy, but they weren't coming after you.
Exactly.
But then all of a sudden, a little country like Ireland said 10% or 6% of something
I think it's 16%, but yeah, it's
Okay,
it's small.
16.
It's small.
is a lot better than 0%,
Yeah.
you know. So now you got all these companies moving there legally.
Or like Apple, who's moved to the Isle of Jersey, which
And
doesn't
again,
do
that's what I
anything.
was leading, saying, okay, so now the Europeans said, hey, wait a minute, Ireland, you're sucking money out of us. So they're going to lean on Ireland, and immediately those battery of 1,000 tax lawyers, and let's face it,
Look for some other place.
if you can save a couple billion a year, it's not chicken feed.
No.
You know, I mean,
Well, it's one of the biggest things now is companies, I think Amazon just settled with the country of Italy of how much taxes they owe Italy because there's so much commerce happening in the cloud now. Who has jurisdiction over that? You know what I mean? So if countries need to evolve their tax strategy to be in the 21st century because doing things the way they used to just doesn't work anymore.
well, didn't we see that even here? Because when Amazon started selling into Massachusetts from outside Massachusetts, you know, Rhode Island, whatever,
There's no sales tax.
there's no sales tax.
Right.
So here I am with my little mom and pop store, and I want to sell an iPhone. And I'm sitting there saying, now, wait a minute. How come they get to sell it sales tax free? So essentially, I'm at a 6% disadvantage.
Simply by not having that brick and mortar business.
And we started evolving and changing the laws to say, wait a minute, that ain't fair. You can't make all your money in South Dakota or somewhere with a low tax rate,
Right.
but yet suck it out of Massachusetts.
Right. Right.
And so they've kind of figured the whole internet commerce thing, but now the big thing is, well, I don't owe you a tax because I didn't pay in U.S. dollars, I paid in Bitcoin. So that's kind of the new strategy of tax evasion is just simply not having U.S.
And I want to go through this Bitcoin because there is so much confusion.
Right.
But, you know, again, tax-wise. Now, when you say a tax cut, I mean, I get a kick out of it because I saw an article that said all the benefit goes to 50% of the people. And you say, but 42% of the American population pays zero federal tax. So if you say tax cut, how do they get a tax cut if they're not paying taxes?
No, I think we're only talking about the middle class that has a temporary tax cut, and we have the upper class, if you want to say, call them that. We're getting a more permanent tax cut, as well as corporates tax cuts are being done here. His goal was go get me a tax bill I can sign that's going to have tax cuts. It wasn't a tax reform. It's nothing's permanent here for the regular working man who brings home a salary, which most of us are here.
But isn't tax reform plutonium? I mean, you're going to go after the 42% that pay nothing?
It's hard. Well, but then
17%
they
below
pay
the poverty
federal
line.
income taxes, but he still pays sales tax.
No, I understand, but from a federal level, 17% at the poverty level or below and 25% of retired. You're going to take them on and say, okay, what was it, Steve Forbes, I think many years ago, ran on a flat tax bill.
Flat tax, right, yep, no deductions, right?
Be like FICA. I get $100 for my salary, I see 93. I don't have to file, I don't have to do anything, they just take it.
Right.
I liked Ron Paul was asked, what would you say to the people, the 50% of the people that don't pay federal income tax? And he basically said something along the lines, well, that means we're halfway there. In other words, saying we should abolish the income tax. And I kind of like that idea better than, trying to tax the rich more. Well, let's just tax everyone less.
But then how do you pay for things?
You pay for less things. You do it on a local level. Local level creates more local control, which creates greater efficiency of tax
Creates
dollars.
greater disparity between the union. So that's the problem. If you bring too many things back to the local level, then your country becomes less united, less similar. You have different decisions being made at different places in the country. Poorer states make different decisions than richer states. And then you have a real disparity between the
Well, don't we
places
see it
that we
even
go
in
to.
Massachusetts on schools? Where you start saying some of the more affluent communities
Isn't that,
spend more on their schools
isn't that why we get a cherry sheet, though, from the state to try to balance
to try
some of
and
this off?
equalize it.
Right, right. If you eliminated that, what would happen? If you
Well, there's the
eliminate-
question. If you eliminated mass state tax,
Well, at least for, and that part that was going to education, you'd have taxes for roads, for example. But say you had every school district have to be self-supporting, what would happen?
The problem I have is that that money comes with strings attached. So, schools are funded from the local, state, and federal level. I don't want someone in DC telling me or our local school committee how to teach our children. I
Why
think
not?
those decisions should be made on the local level.
Should
And
there be a set of facts that everybody has to be taught? Do you want one group of educators coming up with a different criteria and curriculum than others?
Yeah, I think we are adult enough to make those decisions
Are we?
on what those criteria should
Why
be.
are we any different than 300 years ago? Who knows? You could have complete changes if you had no federal overseeing of education system. You might have different parts of the country going in different places.
And you know what? And then the whole idea of the union, though, was for 50 states to compete.
13.
Well, excuse me, now 50. It's like 50 experiments, if you will. And they compete and they see what works, they see what doesn't. And if you see a state that is much more successful than you, then imitate what they're doing. You know what I mean? So we're constantly improving ourselves. If everyone's just doing the same thing, there's no frame of reference to say that is the best thing to do, because we don't know. Everyone's doing the same thing. There's no competition.
but even, take a program like school choice. We're leaning on our school committee to say, guys, you got to fix the fact it's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars because more kids are leaving Milford as part of the school choice program than kids coming in. So there is pressure there.
And school choice is a great example of competition that is driving Milford schools to do better. And that's one of the things that Republicans want to do, is to create more school vouchers so that, school choice isn't uniform across the nation. Not every state has school choice. So we want more of that involved on the local level.
Not everybody can contribute to school choice as a parent with kids. The idea that you can take your child and have them go to a school in another district, another town. Not everybody has those resources to do that. Look at what's just happened in Boston, where they decided to start the
And it
elementary
started at
school-
midnight or, I'm
early
sorry,
earlier
7 in the
morning.
morning.
It's disrupted everybody's ability to work and get their kids to school. So the idea that, let's have more school choice, so you can take your kid and drive them to Westboro, for example, or to Franklin. Not everybody can do that. So what you're doing is while in the idea that you're trying to make things better by giving more people choices, you are actually now locking more people in that don't have that advantage into a school system that maybe isn't competing because you're taking resources away. Isn't it better to make the school better, I think the point that we're trying to get at, make your local school better so that no one will be looking at private schools or charter schools or school choice, and you want to stay in over, because this is your town.
Yeah, but if you're locked into a school, where's the incentive to do better? If there
You
is no
need to
school
have
choice,
your town,
if there is no school choice, you're forced to go to that school no matter what, and therefore
you should want to go to that school. Your town should
I
be
agree,
committed to
but-
making the school the best it can be.
Now, let's look at reality. I mean, yes, world peace is a wonderful thing, and you should want to make schools better, and you should allocate the resources. But now, how do you turn around and say, hey, Milford, you've got a disproportionate amount of low-income people because a lot of the immigrants are coming to Milford, just like they did 100 years ago. And they built Milford, but today, you've got a lot more people in this town renting because they can't afford to buy homes, as opposed to neighboring towns. So when you look at our scores, on average, they're lower. You know, when you really deep dive into them, you see that our top kids are doing as well as anybody.
Sure.
But you got a lot of kids who are just starting in this country.
So it takes them harder. It's harder.
So you turn around and say, wait a minute, why shouldn't we get a little bit extra? Because we want to help those kids assimilate faster, better.
So you're going to ask the local taxpayers to make that, or you're going to ask the higher government to do that?
And see, there's the logic. By
That's the
doing the
logic.
cherry sheet, you're saying all of Massachusetts benefits from all these new immigrants.
Right. How much revenue does the town of Weston need from the State House? Right? They don't. But Milford, because of its population mix, probably needs more.
Oh, and when we looked, we get, what, 24% of our school, or 47% total of what we spend on school comes from the state. You got places like Springfield, Lawrence that are in the 80s.
sure.
Right.
And we're talking about state level. To me, state level is still local level. I mean, I could call or walk into Brian Murray's office, who is my state representative, and get answers and make my voice heard on those issues. So state level, to me, is still local.
More local than Washington.
Much more local. I mean, I personally have never met my congressman, but, you know, it's,
Joe Kennedy?
yeah.
Give him a call.
So, you know, it's harder to do on that level, but, you know.
He watches this show, right, Al?
I just got
Come
his
on down.
Christmas card with his daughter. It's cool. He's got a neat Christmas card this year.
But you see how dysfunctional Washington is. Even if you had a great meeting with your congressman, doesn't mean they can do anything. There's just so many.
It's because we've been really polarized here. It's
So
polarizing
polarized.
politics at the national level.
At the national level,
And
it's
you
just
know,
ridiculous.
I don't believe the Democrats are any better than the Republicans or any worse. Because, you know, everything we see now, we're not going to appoint this Supreme Court justice. No matter who you send, we're not, wait a minute, that's just wrong. Because what worries me is this polarization. If I'm a far right leaning person, the next Supreme Court justice, I'm going to pick one way over to the side because the Democrats have already told me they're not going to, no matter who I bring up, since I can sneak through with 51.
50, really.
Well, 50 plus the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So all I need is 51 votes. Why would I pick somebody towards the middle? If it was 60, then I have to pick somebody towards the middle, or we're going to have a Supreme Court of one.
Correct.
But what scares me is, okay, the Republicans are in right now, and they're going to force every Supreme Court justice way to the right. As soon as Democrats get in, they're going to force them way to the left. And you
It'll
end
be a
up,
long time before that happens, though, Al. So
Yeah,
who
but
knows?
there.
yeah, but
I
once
hear
it
what you're
happens, it's a long time before you can fix it.
You'll
you
no
never
longer
know.
have any swing votes like Kennedy. It's sad.
Kennedy's a wonderful pick for me.
It's sad that we look at Supreme Court cases, and you can say, well, these four are going to vote this way, and these four are going to. the judicial is not supposed to be like that. They're supposed to be nonpartisan, and the fact that we can do that
But Mike,
is disturbing.
The fact that I can take 100 people and say, I know these 50 are going that way, or 48 of these 50 will go that way, and 48 of these, and I'm fighting for 3 or 4 votes. Again, you know, I'm proud to be in Massachusetts. You know, we had Dick Moore, a Democrat, and if you didn't know he was wearing blue shirt, you'd wonder, because he was like a Kennedy, you know, like a Justice Kennedy, that he was voting on the merits of what was best for our area. I see even young Joe Kennedy talk about he's got to reach across. Now, they haven't done it yet, but...
Well, the question is that the first group that reaches across says, okay, you're right, we have to change this. We have to compromise and come up with it. So I'm going to vote for your bill. Okay, well, where's the reciprocation there, right? And if it never comes, then you get burnt. You say, well, I'm not going to do that again because I met you halfway here, but you won't meet me 2/3 of the way there, or whatever it comes to. And that's where we are. I think someone has to say, no, this, from a logic, pragmatic standpoint, we have to reach an agreement on this. We'll sign this bill, and then let's see if we can't change the way things are done. And I just don't know that. What is it that makes that happen? You know?
I don't know. I mean, you know, to me, the health care issue was the banner, you know, the poster child for, oh my God, if you can't work together, you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, but we had a Republican in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that put together a health care plan with his state house. Should have been the model for the national stage, and he ran away from it.
And you know, it's funny because it seems that model where you have different parties in control of different segments of the government. So Democrats in control of the House, Republicans in control of the Senate, another party in control of the governorship or presidency, seems to work well because it forces you to work together.
To actually compromise and come
Exactly.
to conclusions of what's best for your constituents.
The problem we have in Massachusetts, we have Democrats in control of both branches of our state house, and a Republican governor. The problem is they have enough where they can override a veto from the governor. It's 80-something% Democrat. So anything they want done, they don't need the governor's help. They don't need a compromise with the governor, and that's the problem in this
But
state.
yet, I mean, when you look at our governor, Republican, yet Planned Parenthood,
Yeah, he's a very reasonable Republican.
that's what I'm saying. I'm comfortable with Charlie, just like I was with Weld, because he wasn't, and Charlie hasn't voted dogma. You know, when he really felt that it was the wrong choice for Planned Parenthood, couldn't have gone well in the Republican circles that he stood up and said, no, I'll fix it in my little Massachusetts.
Right. And you can't, if you are a minority party like Republicans are in Massachusetts, you cannot have a Donald Trump or anything like even close to that run in the state and actually expect to win any elections. You can't. So if you're going to do a statewide election, it has to be a Republican that is more moderate, if you will. The Mitt Romney's, the Welds, and
No, it depends who the Democrats put up, though. I mean, you're right, it's very difficult, but some of the Democratic candidates in some offices are just, people can't vote for them. I mean, take Martha Coakley, no one could vote for her. I mean, these are the things that happen. So you can have a dynamic Republican. My biggest gripe with the last Republican governor is Bill Weld. We won't talk about Salucci because he was a part-time governor and then, headed for Canada after that. But he had an opportunity to build his party, and support local candidates. And even if he made some inroads, he never did it. And Mitt Romney was the same way. Mitt Romney didn't support any expansion of his party in the state. He didn't even support his lieutenant governor when she ran for governor, Kerry Healy. He was too busy running for president.
But why does it feel like, especially in our little Blackstone Valley banana area, that the Republican Party has expanded?
It has. It's gotten, especially in Worcester County. Worcester County is the Republican stronghold of Massachusetts. Now,
Yeah, all 12 Republicans live in that.
in Worcester County. The thing is, the population concentration is all within Boston in those surrounding communities.
Springfield.
And
yeah.
then you have the section of Western
Worcester.
Mass.
You got 3 big pockets.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the Boston pocket's,
Huge.
yes, much bigger.
However, yes, it does feel like, because just 6 years ago, we had 4 state senators out of 40. Now we have 7.
7.
Almost double, but it's still
Still 7 out of 40.
still 7 out of 40. But yes, you're right. There has been an expansion. You can't go from 4 to 20 overnight in one cycle. That's just never going to happen. But yes, we're building the party in Massachusetts, especially at the core in Worcester County, and trying to.
Why and how?
Why? Well, because we see. I mean, you look at scandal after scandal after scandal. When one party rules, it's never good. Whether it's Republican or Democrat. I mean, the state senator is currently under investigation for scandals with his husband. You have former Speaker of the House under investigation. You have another former.
At Speaker of the House in Massachusetts, you're
It's like a running joke.
of course, you're supposed to go to jail eventually.
So,
Don't even joke about something like that.
Well, you,
I know it's reality,
right.
but
for the last,
but if 4 out of the last 4 have been under arrest in some form. So, and the former state senator, president, is also under investigation right now. So both the current and the past
yes, I know.
are under investigation. So and that happens because of one party rule. So the why is because there needs to be balance. There needs to be checks and balances. We need to have reasonable Republicans having meetings with reasonable Democrats and working things out in a positive manner. The how is basically it's through grassroots organizations. It's through candidate selection through local, building up Republicans in local settings, because nobody wants to elect a state rep that's never held a local position. That's very seldom happens.
Right.
They like to see school committee members, selectmen, just someone so that
with some experience.
some experience. They know what government's like. They know what elections like, and they get to know you. They get to trust you, and they get to see how you're really going to be once you're in. Because anybody can say what they want during a campaign. How are you when you're finally in office?
Can you be a working member of the body? That's the big thing. Maybe you can run at the executive level and have no experience in politics, but you have other experiences you can bring to it. But I think in the working level, you need to feel that you are part of the roots of the group, this area that you're going to represent.
You also have a very large population in Massachusetts that are classified under a term I really despise, unenrolled. That really annoys me. I'm not unenrolled. It makes it seem like I don't want to have anything to do with politics. But I learned very quickly that I don't get to vote in a primary.
Primaries are party driven, that's
No,
why.
Right.
You get to vote in a primary. You get to choose because you're unenrolled. Whichever.
That's why I'm unenrolled.
Then you have to unenroll again.
If I'm a Republican and the real race
is between
is the Democrats,
right.
I don't get a say.
Exactly.
If I'm a Democrat,
No, why should you? It's a party-driven election, a primary. That's all that is. They need to put up a candidate. You could make a point that we should do away with primaries and have a ballot on November whatever that has 37 people
No,
on it.
I mean I like the nonpartisan primary function, and I there's a couple states that do it, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but where you have essentially all those 37 candidates or whatever run in a primary, and then the top 2 then in the general run off. And
Yeah.
that seems to work well in those states that they have it.
see, I'd be okay with that, but you run the risk, then you have 2 Democrats or 2
So be it.
Republicans.
And that's happening,
They're
right?
one and number 2 that the people wanted.
And I'd be comfortable with that. But, now I can't be independent
Right.
because there's an independent party, so I have to be unenrolled.
Yeah, because you can't be you're not in an independent party. You're not in a party,
Right.
right? You're not having a party, Al. When
So
you're
that's what the
independent, you don't
unenrolled-
have
which-
anybody to vote for.
There is an independent party of Milford that if you enroll in that party, you cannot function or you cannot
Then I can't
participate.
pick a red or a blue,
You
I gotta
cannot
pick a
participate in any primary because
chartreuse.
you have to participate in the independent party primary,
And of course-
which there's no candidates.
And of course, Massachusetts, I love. It's the only state that I went in and said, okay, give me one of those blue ones. I'm voting for John Fernandez. And they said,
That's a red one.
that's a red one.
That's a red one.
I said, does John know he's classified as red? Is he shaking?
That's
Party colors were really only set in stone in the 70s and 80s once we had color TV and they
Color
started-
TV, and it was the
putting it-
news that started
Yeah.
painting.
Before that, the colors were never consistent.
No. Don't
So is this tax cut going to work?
Well, all I know was that I think one of the things he had promised is you could fill out your income taxes on a postcard and mail them in. I don't think that's quite working. I think it's just as complicated as was before. And then they cut the IRS's budget, so they're having trouble implementing it, even the tax bill as it's signed right now. Not enough people to go out and do
Isn't it
it.
supposed to be, now that you have double the standard deduction, you're casting that net much wider?
Right, and then that's the thing.
Most people in
It's-
Massachusetts don't even use the standard deduction because they have more regular deductions. But now,
But now they're going to limit those deductions, so they'll benefit from taking the standard deduction. So last year I itemized, but this upcoming years I'll probably just take the standard deduction.
so how do you feel about the fact that they're eliminating the deduction on state and local taxes? Aren't you now basically taxing a tax? Aren't
Yeah, but
you
you do-
now taxing a tax?
Michael, you know what I feel about that? First of all, it's not a polite term, but I'm taking the coasts, which somehow got painted blue, saying, Ungawa, I'm going to stab you. Because the people who are going to be penalized with this
property
$10,000
owners?
limit, it's not people in South Dakota,
No.
not people in Iowa or the middle of the country where it was all painted red. It's California, Oregon, Washington.
It's no doubt that
It's East Coast.
the president and the Republicans are rewarding the states that have elected them.
Yes.
It's clear as day. The high tax states, as you call them, they're getting hurt, and we're in a high tax
Because they're
state.
blue.
Because they're blue, and there's no doubt that's part of it. That's why it's not as simple as a postcard. Because anytime
And I would
Congress
be
gets
okay if
involved,
they would.
it's going to get complicated.
Years ago when I lived in D.C., Marion Barry, the corrupt mayor, who went to jail many times, point blank said, we have 6 plows. I'm being facetious, but we have I will plow each precinct by their voting record. Used to be a joke where my darling bride lived in Chevy Chase. They said, pray for an early spring.
Right.
Because you're never going to get a plow to come to Chevy Chase. I mean, if they just came out and said, okay, we're taking care of the people who took care of us. It's the middle red states. All of you people who voted blue on the coast, too bad. And
That's the reality of it.
it's going to zorch us. Because when you look at the average property tax in Milford, it's about $5,000. So leaves you $5,000, combined income, $100,000, you hit it. $90,000 of combined income between you and your spouse, you're over the limit.
And even though, okay, we're getting hit, when we say that, it just means we're getting less of a tax cut than other states that don't tax as much. We're still getting, 80% of Massachusetts residents will still get a tax cut. It just won't be as many as the people, or as much of a tax cut as the people in other states.
And if that comes to fruition, I think he'll pick up a lot of credit. If 80% of the people in Massachusetts see $1 less taken out of their pocket,
How long does this last for? This part goes away.
It's 10 years, and then it'll
Yeah,
come up for
I guess I'm a bit
renewal.
skeptical on this going away thing.
The
'Cause
tax
whoever-
cut part?
Yeah, because I keep hearing about temporary taxes that get put on. Wasn't the income tax temporary for
Yes,
World War I?
It sure was.
When did that go away?
Never.
Like the tolls too, yeah.
You know, tolls, and you go through this whole thing that, okay, we're putting tolls on the Mass Pike until we pay it off.
Yep.
Okay, how many times has it been paid off?
Well, you
So
got to pay
so
for
you think
the
the
new
tax cuts are
investments
going to be
that they put in.
permanent then?
Yes, if they work. If they work, I do.
Well, 10 years is such a long time. Who knows what kind of situation will be? I mean, I'll tell you right now, if we start a war with North Korea, we are not having a renewal of these tax cuts. You know, if there's another
Yeah,
conflict.
but we're going to have tax increases because we haven't paid for the last 2 wars. I mean, we scream about having $20 trillion in debt and 7 of it. Now, it's not really 7 because we spent 7, but we spent it with American companies. They got all the benefits, but it's still
Sure, but
trillions.
There are consequences to having a high debt to GDP. I mean,
You start
run
paying
it-
more interest than you do anything else on
and
your
then you have
budget.
to, and then what happens is governments print more money to fight and combat the debt load. That leads to more inflation. That leads to more debt and all this other problems. So
It's a slippery
you know,
slope.
it is a slippery
So
slope.
Bitcoin is the answer.
Bitcoin. Okay. You're so Bitcoinish.
I'm still trying to figure out Apple Pay, so that's just wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Bitcoin backed by the full faith of,
The cloud.
The encryption coding. That's all it is. It's basically a code that says that there can only be 21 million Bitcoin in the world. The creator reserved 1 million Bitcoins for himself, so he's now a bazillionaire. And basically, it's a peer-to-peer currency, cryptocurrency, as they call it. And there are people who mine Bitcoin, which is basically people who process our transactions.
so there aren't 21 million Bitcoins in circulation.
Yeah, there's 21 million Bitcoins, and you can own fractions of a Bitcoin. Most people own
Well,
1,000th
I'm going to
of
say,
Bitcoin.
when you say there's a limited number, but I can mine more, so I solve,
It comes out of the transaction. So when you pay something with your credit card, Visa takes a cut from them.
they take 2%.
There are people who set up computers, and those computers process those transactions. So if Mike sets up one of these computers and we have a transaction of Bitcoin, a small fraction of our transaction goes to pay Mike for doing the transaction. And that's what it means by
But now,
mining it.
Bitcoin is worth how much today?
I think it has a market cap of $150 billion.
No, but a Bitcoin.
Oh, 15? Depends on the
1,500?
day.
Let's
No,
just say
1,000.
15,000. If I had a $15,000 bill, how the heck would I spend it?
You would have a Bitcoin wallet, and you would go through those motions. It's all coded in there. I don't use Bitcoin, so I haven't yet.
No, but I'm trying to figure out, okay, I want to go buy a coffee, because, the ultimate is Amazon or Starbucks will take 0.0001 Bitcoin.
Right.
Right.
That's what your account will then.
Right, just like
Be debited.
your bank account has a unique account number. Your e-wallet, if you will have a unique ID. And, I'll tell Mike I want to transact X amount of Bitcoin from my unique ID to your unique ID, and he'll process it.
Now, who is Mike in that?
He would be a Bitcoin miner, and there's
when
millions of them
I
across
think of
the globe.
Bitcoin, it seemed to gain fame early on because it was an anonymous way of funding arms deals, drug deals, all sorts of things on the dark web.
Yeah, those were the first to pick it up, but now it's become more accepted. There's literally hundreds of restaurants in New York City that will accept Bitcoin. Because people are starting to use it, people are accepting it as a currency, and it's really why it's blown up in early 2017. I almost said earlier this year, but we're in 2018. It was at $400 a Bitcoin. Now it's 15,000. That's a huge gain in the value of Bitcoin because it's being so much more widely accepted. It's gaining a reputation of being credible and accepted, and you can use it.
Is it, or is it the herd mentality? Everybody's hearing how much it's gone up, so
Part
then
of
now
it
they're
is that.
jumping on.
There's no question. There are investment banks that have started trading Bitcoin on derivatives, so option contracts,
And there you go.
that has definitely pushed.
That's going to give it some credibility, because at least the derivatives, somebody's standing behind it.
Yeah.
Unless it's a house of cards, and we've seen that happen to derivatives before, right?
And no doubt, there is a huge potential of a Bitcoin crash. No doubt about it, just because it's just gained so much so fast.
So that's where it becomes problematic with an average person who thinks he's got X amount of revenue or value that he can go out and I'm going to pay my mortgage with this, and I'm going to go out to dinner. All of a sudden, one day wakes up and there's nothing there.
But isn't it the same when we look at in your portfolio?
Well, but if he wants this to be liquid, which is what currency is, right? So your 401k, right? You want that to be making money for you, but in the same time, I've got $50 in my pocket. But if you want Bitcoin to be liquid, then you don't know what you've got in your pocket, and that could be the problem.
You think about your portfolio, and your investment advisor would tell you, okay, how much, if you want to really swing for the fence, you can afford to lose $100. So you go buy some penny stock or something that tomorrow could be worth $1, and you could make 1,000% increase.
Sure. But
tomorrow it can be worth 0. So I have a problem when you say the average person.
It makes a lot more sense in countries where their currency is in shambles. Venezuela is a great example.
Wasn't that gold?
Gold used to be the standard.
I say, wasn't gold,
But gold
the
is
Bitcoin?
heavy. Gold is heavy.
It's a real entity, but it's the same idea of Bitcoin.
Yeah, a Treasury Secretary visited Fort Knox with his wife, and she was just enamored at Fort Knox with all that gold there.
So there's a couple issues. I mean, you could carry a whole bunch of gold, but again, gold is heavy. People create forgeries that they fake gold all the time. You can't do that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, because of the encoding, you can't just forge it and fake it. So
it's interesting though. So to go down that path, so how many years have we talked about getting rid of paper currency, right?
Yes.
And going to coins. We could just jump right over coins from paper right to electronic encrypted currency.
Pretty soon we'll get some type of chip underneath our palms or something like that, and we'll just, instead of Apple Pay, we'll just put our hand on there and pay our...
I mean, I'm getting used to Apple Pay and all this good stuff, okay?
Maybe it'd be a piece of jewelry instead of
I mean, I have to admit that I've made the jump to using my credit card for everything. I mean, the first time I had to use a credit card to buy a cup of coffee,
it's tough.
I felt guilty.
Right, because there's a fee involved.
Yeah, and I knew that my daughters raided my wallet. I used to have money in there, and all of a sudden it's gone. And I'm there at Dunkin' Donuts, and I guess it was necessity. I wanted alkaloids. Give me alkaloids. I'll use my credit card. But now I find I really don't use cash anywhere near as often. I'm no longer ashamed to buy a cup of coffee at Dunkin'
Small
Donuts.
things, right?
Because it's become culturally accepted. And if that ever happens with Bitcoin, where you can buy things on Amazon with Bitcoin, when and if that happens, the value and stability of Bitcoin will be much greater.
But what worries me, Mike, is, okay, last year somebody decided they needed to use my credit card more than I did and put $600 of iTunes on my credit card.
Somebody hopefully.
I called Citibank and said, not
No,
me.
not you. Oh, okay.
And Citibank
stopped it. Right?
stopped it. And I took 2 weeks, but I got my $600 credit, and life was good. Somehow, every so often I read that somebody cracked the code and got access. Why do I believe Bitcoin is so smart that nobody can crack the Bitcoin code?
No one has.
Okay.
And that's the only faith you have, because no one has done it yet. And that's really all you have going. The day that Bitcoin is cracked, as you say, forget it. It's worthless.
Right, because who am I going to complain to?
Move on to, instead of 128-bit encryption, go to 256.
256.
Because that's, you need the next bit of encryption. It's just...
Yeah, but 64 was uncrackable. 32, never anybody's going to crack 32-bit. Now...
No, well, we've known 256 is pretty good for a while now. So
For a while.
For a while.
I just worry that somebody cracks it and all my little bitty coins. And then who do I call? I can't call my Citibank
Can't call
rep.
Chase or if
No, I can't call
Citibank is
Citibank
fraud
and say-
protection. They're great though. They helped. They did the same thing with me. I said somebody had taken and used it at some place in New Jersey, and I said that wasn't me. So when I went down to Brooklyn with my daughter this past week, we went to a restaurant and they actually went to get gasoline and they declined the charge. And I called them up and they said, well, we just want to make sure it was you here. And in New York. I said, yep.
But at least I have in faith of,
Yes.
Sure, but
Citibank.
there's always risk of something, right? So if there were a solar flare or some type of EMP explosion and all those ones and zeros just went to zeros, all electronics died.
That's when the magnetic field leaves us.
When the magnetic field, the pole switch, whatever happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of cash on me. Most of my investments and all that are electronic.
well, by definition, we're married with children,
Well,
so
so I have-
$32.80 is my allowance. I'm not going to have more than that any time, because if I do, they take it.
Yeah, so, I mean, we all put faith into something, and Bitcoin is making the argument through peer-to-peer networks that it has less of a risk than a central bank-controlled currency backed by
A government
some
and a
government.
country. That's taken us to the place where I think the first President Bush wanted us to be, right? The New World Order?
I have no comment on that.
No, I mean, but think about the common market. They decided to have a common currency, and they set rules. And now they're suffering from the fact that countries like France have said, no. And what are you going to do?
England saying goodbye,
And England's, they never went to the currency, but
but they're leaving the market.
Yeah.
they're leaving the market. So I have a hard enough time trusting these countries. Never mind anonymous people on the dark web that tell me, don't worry, we're safe.
And if we're supposed to be America first, are we surrendering America to a larger global
It's completely
community?
voluntary if you don't want, I mean, America is all about freedom. You have the freedom to choose. Do you want your Federal Reserve note in your wallet, or do you want something that has a limited supply that they can't just print more of?
I wish I could trust in
It's not for
nobody.
everybody.
No, it isn't. I
and
mean,
it's-
I'll admit, it's not for me because
I haven't, like I said, I haven't touched it. I'm very skeptical. I'm very nervous.
But it is
about
gaining
already.
inertia. It is gaining inertia.
Oh, absolutely.
And, well,
I
could be
just
inevitable.
wonder, 2008, we saw the stock market crash. People abandoned ship and got burnt. If you stayed the course, I remember getting the phone call saying, I'll just say the simple words, stay the course. May take you 2 or 3 years, but sure enough, caught up and then some. I don't know that when the Bitcoin goes down from 15,000 to 10,000, 5,000, 1,000, that people will stay the course. Local question. People are asking, and you're FinCom members, how come you're so proud that the levy barely went up? We can raise the levy, the total amount we tax for everything, houses, cars, dogs, sheep, whatever, by 2.5% a year, just by getting town meeting to say, yep, Milford hasn't done 2.5% in a long time.
Correct.
Yeah, and then when we do our budget cycle, to just put that right in there and leave it there, right?
And we've made it pretty clear, a few of us, that we don't like profanity in finance committee meetings, so terms like 2.5 override and debt exclusion are very profane in some people's opinions, mine included.
Absolutely.
But now, you got people typing in saying, my taxes went up 5 to 10% this year.
Sure.
So if the levy only went up 1% or 1.5%, how come my taxes went up 10% on my house?
Because the levy doesn't, it affects your individual tax base, but your individual taxes can swing much more than the pool. So if you're going to pay 15% more, there's probably someone else that's paying 10% less. It's just everything balances out. You might pay 15% more in 1 year, and this happened to me 1 year where I paid 15% more, and then the next 3-4 years, it only went up 1%. Because it's market-driven, the assessment on your value.
Right, it's about the valuation and the assessment of the market, which, there's always been debate about how valid it is and how uniform it is and how should it be at 100% valuation, or a percentage less than that?
But isn't that just, when I first came on the FinCom, they talked about our tax rate hasn't gone up. And I said, that's a joke. Nobody wants to know about their tax rate. What they want to know is the check, my opinion, is the check I'm writing this year bigger or smaller than last year?
Yeah.
The rest I don't care about.
Right.
So now,
So your tax rate may not go up, but your taxes go up because it's different, right? Effective tax rate versus actual tax
the tax rate goes
dollars.
down, but your valuation goes up, you're still paying more.
And, right, and, the
Now,
expenses
the
to run
FinCom
the
can
town.
control the pool.
Oh, yes.
Not, FinCom can control nothing.
No, we're just
FinCom
an
can
advisory,
recommend.
we're an advisory committee.
You know,
The town controls the pool.
the town meeting controls the pool. So we let the pool go up 1%. But inside that pool, you have a rate for residential, commercial, and industrial. So in most times, the fact that the commercial is paying an extra premium, like if I have a $100,000 asset, I'm probably paying 50% more if it's commercial than if it's residential. Well, that works the double against you if commercial rates go down.
Right.
You know, the pool stays the same. You know, the pool is $100.
Right.
That's what we need to run the town. So if commercial evaluations go down and they're already paying 50% more, that puts a heavy burden
On the residential.
on the residential.
Right. You're a regular person that, is trying to live on a salary or maybe a fixed income, right? And doesn't have the ability to perhaps produce as much revenue as a commercial or an industrial entity does. I think that's part of the argument there. So you don't want that balance to go out. You want to try to keep it on the commercial side of the.
But in any given year, you can turn around and say, okay, the prices of multiple family homes went way up compared to commercial. And we've had years where my tax increase was actually 0 or negative,
Sure, yeah.
because commercial value of properties shot up. And with their extra premium, it took the pressure off of residential.
You also see subclasses compete against each other. So there was a time where single-family homes really spiked, 2004, 2005, and that benefited a lot of the three-family homes in town.
And the condos.
Because those single families were being valued so much higher than at least the growth.
Yeah.
That they ended starting up paying. You could pay less for a three-family than a single family. It was actually getting that kind of ridiculous. It's kind of balanced out now, but when you have those gains in any subclass, that's really what hurts you. So condos could spike.
But it hurts you short term.
Short term. Everything balances out in the long
if
run.
you
The
look
problem is that
over,
they have to base it off of sales. And let's say you own something like a 10-family home. How many 10-family homes sell in Milford in the last year?
but I mean, if I look at 20 cent, I'm one of these anal retentives that actually plots it, and I look at my tax, how much I'm actually paying, don't care why. It's been very reasonable in Milford. Now, any given year,
Right.
I could be grumpy because I can see my taxes jump a big number.
Right. Well, we've never seen them go down, right? They go
No,
up.
I mean,
they
when
just
we
go up
talk about going
slowly.
down, it's because it went up 1% or 0.5%, and I'm excited.
But it's still going. It's still on a curve up.
The curve, not once did the curve ever really
We had one
sustain.
chance. We had one
you
chance
might
to make
have
that
an off
happen. Al.
year. You might have one off year where it goes down 0.5%, but generally it goes up at an average of about 3%.
We had one chance. You're never going to get off that casino thing.
I didn't say it, but anyways, that
I
was
mean,
it.
realistically, I still believe Nunes and crew never made a compelling argument as to why
No.
Milford needed the casino.
Well, now we're getting a bunch of 40B housing, so
Oh, hello, we just talked with the health department that they're putting in their own sewer treatment plant.
they are.
What a scary movie. I mean, I brought up the fact that we had Cape Cod berms on our development. Not nice Milford pink granite.
No,
And 3 years later, the berms got worn down, they're gone.
of course. One plow takes care of those.
And you turn around and say, okay, now who do I go after? the scariest movie that I can think of is got 300 family homes or apartments, condos, whatever you're going to call them. I guess they're apartments.
There are
And if that sewer treatment fails in 5 years, what are you going to tell them? Don't go to the party? And then who do you go after?
private development, I guess.
Well,
Won't be there, right?
private development, how many of these
Well, if it's an
homes?
apartment, isn't it going to be managed by a
Yeah. And what
property
happens
owner?
when they do an asset sale to another company and don't indemnify? And then there's this massive bill. Who are they going to come after? Milford taxpayers.
indemnification?
We're going through that with the water company indemnification.
So,
Yeah,
so
I didn't wanna bring that
why
up.
aren't we compelling the sewer department to hook up to this,
Well, that's what the health department's trying.
right?
But 40B has its own
problem with
rules.
40B is that the town can't say no to anything, really.
No, if you want to appeal the 40B project, you appeal to the state commission that was set up to promote 40B projects.
Right.
Okay, right. So I don't know if you're being so much against the actual project, except for this element of,
No, my problem is I want them living by the same rules we live by.
right?
So, real quick, because this kind of goes to why libertarian values, I think, are crucial. We create zoning because we want to protect property values, but then property values go so high that people in low incomes can't afford housing, so we create another law, 40B housing, to subsidize the low income housing, and so this just becomes a created problem. And
But then they say you're a snob.
but it's, government, when it fixes a problem, it usually creates two more.
Well,
Government is reactionary.
It is.
Right? It's just trying to solve problems, but sometimes it's like that game whack-a-mole, right? You don't know where it's coming the next one.
government deals with timeframes of one election. I'm sorry, the thing that annoys me the most is everybody's worried about what do I have to do and say so I get the funding to win the next two-year election cycle. But as always, thank you. It's always enjoyable.
having
It's
us.
so much calmer.
We try to be.
And again, get to know the people who represent you for all these reasons, whether you agree or disagree. The key is get out, be informed, and then for the love of God, vote. I may not agree with who you vote for. I may agree with who you vote for. But I'll respect you for voting, because that's the key. And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. And let's hope that all these new laws do work.
Happy New Year, Al.
Happy New Year.
Not too long since I've been home.